Good afternoon, everybody. And sorry for this small delay over here. I would like to talk to you about a very, very marginalized community, which you must have read in the abstract. I'll just read out a small article that I had written a few years ago on the dying Drokpas of North Sikkim. Sikkim just juts out just a little onto the Tibetan plateau to the north. The dry, high grasslands of this unique region of North Sikkim have been traditionally used by generations of nomadic Tibetans to graze their yak, sheep, and pashmina type of goats. These gentle people, called the Drokpas, are perhaps one of the few humans to be able to survive and subsist at the highest altitudes in the world, tolerating the severest climatic conditions and one of the harshest lifestyles known to mankind. Devout Buddhists, they are also one of the rare communities which practice eco-friendly sky burials. Today in North Sikkim, the apparently barren, treeless cold desert of Solamu, the Lonak Valley and the Lashar Valley is home to around just about 20 Drokpa families. They are responsible for almost the entire yak population of the state. Earlier, with no border issues involved, around 12 to 13 Drokpa families freely roamed the Solamu Plateau right up to Tibet, into Tibet, while almost as many used the Lonak Valley and the adjoining areas north via passes like Chotan-Nimala and Nakula. Their ancient lifestyle is virtually unchanged over the centuries, and especially in Sikkim since the Chogyal's time. Earlier, when the borders were open, the Sikkim Drokpas grazed their livestock during winter right up to Khambazong in Tibet. The Tibet Drokpas, on their part, came in during summer with their livestock, right down to Dongkung, Lumma, Khering, and Nechen areas on our side. The Lachungpas of Lachin Valley, further below, went up into Tibet on yak and horse to trade. Oil, food, rations, sugar, and cloth from Kalimpong were the main items. They brought back wool, large bales of which were taken directly to Kalimpong, salt, carpets, blankets, cloth, and sheep mutton. It's called Usha and it's really in great demand. The Lachungpas of Lachung Valley, they went via Donkyala into the Solamu and right up to Gyantse in Tibet for similar trade. There used to be a sort of heart in this Solamu area. Today it's a tourist destination. And the population was very small, the business was good. At present, these items, the meat, cheese, butter, fat called silu, and the yak and sheep meat, and other products from this region, they are really delicacies which we can't get even if we have a lot of money to buy them. But once the borders closed and the Indian Army occupied this area, this idyllic kind of timeless lifestyle had changed completely, with no more border crossings for trade, for grazing, or for marriage. The Sikkim Drokpas were restricted to a tiny patch of the vast Tibetan plateau, the roof of the world, the Tsolamu Plateau, the Lonak, and the Lashar. They were now at the mercy of the vagaries of nature, supplementing their pastoral livelihoods with odd jobs with the Indian Army and husbanding some livestock belonging to the Lachenpas besides their own. The earlier transborder migrations ensured the mixing of people, resulting in intermarriage in a larger region, and was also good for crossbreeding of the domestic livestock. And there was no dearth of fodder. Today, the situation is very grim. Only 7 families remain in Lonak Valley, which is a famed international flyway for migratory birds, and the breeding ground of the endangered black-necked crane. The entire sheep population of this valley has been wiped out over the last 2 decades, and many of the people have sold out their livestock and migrated as refugees to either Ravangla or Dharamsala. On the Cholamu Plateau, those same 12-odd families, they are still holding on to this tenuous lifestyle, and mostly now they are related to each other. There are a sizable number of unmarried males who can find no partners to endure this difficult life where family members have to get up at around 1 in the morning to process the dairy products and then to cook and eat and then to go out grazing with their animals and return home late in the evening. At these altitudes, normal humans like us, we get plagued with altitude sickness and we find it difficult to walk in this rarefied atmosphere. And the yaks also have begun to show the effects of inbreeding. Gone forever are the proud Tibetan mastiffs, the livestock guardians, because they have got mixed with the lowland mongrels. The progressive Drokpas who sent off their children to schools in Gangtok, Ravangla, Delhi, Calcutta, they don't expect them to return to this nomadic shepherd life. And the elders know and acknowledge that they are the last in their line. Though they themselves have not changed, everything around them has. Today, their cold desert, with its fabulous medicinal plants and endangered wildlife, is crisscrossed with roads populated with non native people, occupied for defense priorities, riddled with landmines, and grazed to the ground. It is time we were aware that the day is not far off when the Drokpas all die out quietly, and the only yak we would see would be moth eaten skins on the ground or a pair of horns adorning a doorway. During the first meeting of the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan in Gangtok, in 2001, two Drokpas addressed the gathering, asking if the government could take responsibility for all their yak and retain them as chowkidars. At least they could be with the animals to the end. Could we do anything at all for them? I mean, given this, I would just like to show you some pictures of. This was basically my abstract, in which we are in the youngest mountain in the world. We are on the roof of the world. We have a slice of Ladakh in Sikkim. And this is just a population of less than 100 human beings left today. And nobody is studying them, nobody is really seems to be interested in their efforts, I mean, the way they live. And that is, they are virtually the guardians of the water banks of Sikkim. All our glaciers, all our Great Lakes are in this region, and the amount of wildlife that we can see in this region, we can find nowhere else in Sikkim. And this is a wildlife that is not afraid of them. I was talking about this really, really tiny patch to the extreme north of Sikkim. And you can see here probably the only place in the world where a globally threatened population of the great Tibetan sheep, which is not found anywhere else in the Himalayas. The same George Haller, he said that he has never seen more than 15 animals grazing together, the great Tibetan sheep, which is the ancestor of our domestic sheep. So we need these animals as well. And you can see they are grazing peacefully with the yak. And similarly, the sheep population. Now, all this, you can see the plateau was a really, really pristine place, and the nomads were the ones who are the actual owners, the guardians of this plateau, and its wonderful wildlife, its medicinal plants, the wild genetic reservoir for our food plants, medicines, birds and animals, as well as it's a very sacred landscape. We worship the entire landscape. And as you can see, I mean, the area I'm talking about is the extreme area to the left called the Lonak Valley, the top portion which is called the Tibetan Plateau, the pure Tibetan Plateau, and the area under it which is the Lachungpa Valley. So these are three pictures from those areas. And Tevlitso is the area where the black-necked crane, which only nests in India and Ladakh, has attempted nesting in this region and right near the Tibetan camps. And the Lachar Valley is probably the last home for the endangered snow leopard, which is also globally threatened with extinction, which the nomads can see when they walk. We can go for 20 years without seeing one, even when we walk in the forest areas, but they see them as just a matter of chance. But coming to the various biodiversity issues in this region, I'm talking about this because I work on the biodiversity of Sikkim through the forest department, which brings me into close contact with these people, and I lived with them, I moved with them, and they told me about their problems, and I tried to get them to write about their history in their language, so that if we couldn't interpret it in our way and write down something else which may not be true. So this area has just got a tremendous amount of endangered medicinal plants. But we have major problems now that have come in because of the border issues involved, and one of them is the stray and feral dog menace. So the main problem that we found was, though people may be aware of this issue more as a tourist place or something, but basically there's a severe need for coordination between the various departments which are engaged and are supposed to be protecting this landscape. One of which is mine. So some of the concerns were, especially the international border with all the high altitude lakes, most of the security establishments, the way they are using the lakes, that needs to be really looked at. And then the accidental introduction, as we talk, foot and mouth disease has really spread all throughout this area. Yaks are affected, the wild sheep are limping around, and it's a really dangerous situation. The lot of feral dogs around are now not only killing the wildlife, they're also attacking sheep and goats, and this is severely impacting the nomads. The minefields need to be annually fenced. Their fencing is really loose, and they need to be fenced. The maintenance needs to be done. This also is an issue we've been constantly taking up. A lot of the material left behind during the extensive road construction, the pollutions, the wires and things left around, they're being turned into snares and people are poaching endangered species. So what we did was when we spoke to the people, we had public hearings, we worked with them, and we came out with basically, we grouped everything into 5 major issues. The conservation concerns, livelihood and infrastructure development, the culture conservation issues, and especially the negative outside influences. And I've shown you a picture here of the last Tibetan Mastiff, the pure breed, the most ancient breed of dog in the world, which we have lost today. The last dog was a monastery dog which was eaten up by a regiment there in 2002. And today we have no Tibetan Mastiffs in Sikkim, and each Mastiff actually is worth 3 yaks or 4 yaks, if you look at it. So some of these challenges we are facing today, we need to have more interest. This area is not just a tourist area. This area is the water bank of Sikkim and for the rest of the subcontinent related, which is linked to Sikkim. So unless we tackle these challenges, we will be losing not only the nomads, we will be losing an entire way of life, and we will be losing our water bank. I mean, this was a lake which is called the ocean lake. It's called Gyamthona. And Gyamthona was the only lake where I had counted more than 200 migratory birds. And the water from there was a freshwater spring from Mirdo. It's a place where actually flintstones are found. That is why the place is called Mirdo. And from there, the stream was diverted to the army camp, which is parked on top of the lake. You can see it on the Google website. I mean, so it's okay. Earlier, I was taken to task for showing photographs like this. But then, if you can see over this time, until I could show my own department, this area is right on the Kongrala. Nobody goes there. And so, because there were no photographic evidences, my department also said, okay, maybe, but let's go there and see something. But 10 years later, when I showed them that photograph, then people really were shook up. And this, we have lost the only brackish water lake in the eastern Himalayas. This was a brackish water lake, the last remnant of the Tethys Sea, a prehistoric place, and we have lost it or we are losing it. And this is a photograph I just got from Pema of the Tibetan nomads. Today they are very grown up, they are adults, and Arthur Pazo, who's the photographer here, I mean, thanks to Pema for this picture and both these pictures. Today these people, in fact, just came to me and told me about the foot and mouth disease that are killing off their yaks. And the interesting thing was, they were the only family who were really rearing Tibetan Mastiff, and people were afraid to go to their house. Because a Tibetan Mastiff, you don't own the dog owns you and the territory around you, and will fight to the death to protect its territory. So they are very useful dogs. I have seen one Tibetan nomad and one dog gather together a group of more than 200 yak spread over 6 or 7 kilometers in about 20 minutes, a Tibetan with a slingshot and one Mastiff. Today, because there are no Mastiff, the mongrels, they are running off to the army camp every time the bell rings for lunch, and they don't do herding. And then the animals get into the minefields, and they get injured, and then they get killed by the feral dogs. So these are some really serious issues. And this is still how they are living. They may not be poor, but the lifestyle demands that they have to be on the move, so they can't really have solid establishments. We tried, he's Chingya, he's the father of those children. We had public hearings where they told us these problems. And based on these problems, actually, we came up with the conservation strategy for the cold desert, which is a very useful exercise for us. And what Sophie showed you was the migratory pattern, those blue arrows to the northeast. That's where the transhumance takes place, from the high to the cold, low altitude areas. But if you look at the right side, the nomads are probably the only people in the world who during winter go in still higher up. You hear of people coming down during winter, even animals migrate down during winter. But the nomads will go into the still colder region, the still more inaccessible regions, and spend winter there. And the wildlife comes and lives with them during this time. So just to show you the pattern, to show that the forest department, there's a very bad misconception that the forest department is against grazing, against tourism, against development. But we have had studies done to show that there is no serious conflict. This is the natural home of the yak, and the forest department never had any ideas about removing yaks from their natural home. It's like taking fish out of water. So if you just see, this is where the Great Tibetan sheep, probably the only concentration in the world, congregate. And this is the area for the Kiang, the Tibetan wild ass which come in. And down there, the blue spots are where the in the more mountainous regions where the blue sheep are found. But if you look at this picture, sorry, all the yellow dots are of domestic yak. And you can see actually from the dots that there is not much conflict between the grazing areas for the livestock, wild or domestic. So when you look at the movement, there was a very interesting study done by a student from the Wildlife Institute of India last year. And we have just documented the pattern of movement. His name is Pranav Chenchani. Right now he is in the US probably pursuing a PhD now. But it was very clear, and the movement of the nomads with their livestock, which is now very few sheep and a few yak. Early January, then they come further up. As winter gets more severe, they go further up, and they spend early January, February up there, still up there, and then slowly they start coming down again. So this way they're just moving in a very, very, very small area, which is actually not at all sufficient. And that is why I told you about these various problems. Now, since it was a wildlife study, we tried to see that there could be certain zones which could be segregated purely for wildlife, and some awareness done about these, so that everyone could be happy in their way. Forest department, the graziers, the nomads, the army, everyone. So if we see, basically there are three main stakeholders: the indigenous community itself, which by itself can do a lot of things without becoming beggary and dependent on the government for every small bit of assistance. They have a lot of power, which if they can use it wisely, in fact, they will be helping not only themselves, they'll be helping the whole state. The Indian Army needs a lot of sensitization. They have an eco task force, and we do have a lot of initiatives going on in the Army, but they need to be regularly updated, and they need to do their part in conservation by fencing the minefields, taking care of the stray dog menace, taking care of the garbage issues, and the poaching, and all these related issues. Our forest department needs to work with them, because on paper, it's a forest reserve forest, but in reality, it is under direct control of the Indian Army. I just made a small census of this 100 people, 95 or 97 human beings, Drokpas left there. And if we find that most of the children, the younger popular generation, is going to school or is going to go to school and is not going to come back. And we have this, you can see the blue lines are the males. You can see that as the population is aging, there are very few females. Nobody wants to get their children, girls married into such a difficult area. And this population, we don't know this difficult lifestyle, whether it's going to sustain or not. But what is a reality is that it is because of them that we have the biodiversity. If it was just left to the army and the lowland, the subtemperate, the forest people, the Lachungpas and the Lachungpas, who are known to hunt, who are known to take all advantage of the forests around them, if it weren't for these nomads who don't hunt, we wear nomadic clothes, the wildlife doesn't run away. You wear your clothes, the animal will flee from a kilometer distance. And the basic thing is that the young Sikkimese actually are our best chance. They are very proud of their heritage and their roots. They may not be able to speak the language, but they would like to wear during a cultural program their cultural dress, and they feel good about it. And I think it's the parents and the culture that we are not really able to pass on, but something is seeping in. And of course, the main thing about Mila Repa, this picture, I love showing it in the end, because it's always been our strength about religion protecting biodiversity in Sikkim. And some of the animals that I need to talk about, they're all there in this picture. I think I'm just ending here. Thank you very much.
Questions?
With them, Lashar, I told one man standing there with in the picture, he was the only person who was rearing the dogs. And what happened was, when they were during their nomadic sojourn, they happened to stay near an army camp where the dog bit one of the army persons who came into their camp to buy something. So the people came in, the soldiers came in with their guns, made the nomads hold down the dogs and shot them dead. And that kind of activity happening, was really tragic. And they want their dogs back. They say either you take away everything or you let us live the way we need to live.
And the other question, which was about minefields, are they fencing them in? Doing that, or are they not marked?
Well, they are loosely fenced, because I think it's a strategic of importance to not have them tightly fenced, so that maybe they could take them off easily in some eventuality. But even that loose 3-strand fencing is no guard against a big yak, half a ton yak. And so at least they need to maintain that. I mean, you can put as many skull and crossbones signs, but that doesn't affect any animal or anything that's more than some a certain number of kilos in weight.
The north of Sikkim and the boundary of Tibet, or only in Sikkim, Drokpa, or is there also not on the both sides of the borders?
Earlier, they used to be going on both the sides. So after the border was closed around in the 60s, 70s, then the Chogal allowed those Drokpas who wanted to remain on this side to remain. And some of them have got what is called a Sikkim subject, which is a very important piece of paper. Even then, they are really treated very shabbily by the other people. Like nobody is really allowed to go and help them out for various reasons. And they are very helpful. Even the army needs them because they take their yaks and they take them also during their tours. And the yak take water to the altitude posts. They couldn't survive without these yak. I mean, they don't need petrol. The yak will go on the steepest incline very comfortably. The Lachungpas. All the benefits of tourism will go to the Lachungpas. So instead of having nice traditional houses, now we are having big cement buildings coming up there, which is not really tourism. So what we need to worry about and what we need to really sensitize the people is difference between quality tourism and quantity tourism. And of course, the number of vehicles that are allowed to go up. I mean, it's a mad rush. Everyone wants to go to these holy lakes. When they go there, then they feel sick. And when they feel sick, there is no medical facility available. So then you have a medical facility. Then you have to have toilets. Then you have to have shops selling Uncle Chips. I mean, it just, it just goes on. So if the Lachungpas can be sensitized, or rather they are already taking up this issue, it's very encouraging to know that they are already having a zero waste program on. We just hope that it's successful because they are really keen that the tourism should continue flowing on their side. During the tours on the borders, you often come across the Tibetan nomads from the other side who come into our territory to graze because there's very good grazing and good water on our side. So they do come in, they do graze their livestock, and then they go back.
Why do you think this
I told you, now there was a little spring from Mirdo feeding this lake. So the army diverted it to their camp. A freshwater spring was feeding it.
Was that the only source of that
Yes,
water?
yes. And you could have seen the waves on the side in '94 when I first went there. There was this noise of the waves, and there was this huge frothy kind of, on the banks. The Brahmini ducklings there were ducks, with ducklings in the water. There were other migratory birds. It was wonderful. I mean, it's the probably the most the place where the highest altitude amphibian called a Sikkim snow toad is found. And people really there, they really care for wildlife. They don't harm them. In fact, even at that place, even the army doesn't hunt. So you find a lot of these endangered species hanging up, just outside the camps.
But I have seen some. I visited that lake.
Very few. No, this one you've been to Gyamsa now?
Yes. Without it, of
Mm,
course.
mm. So that why they diverted it was in the front. There's a little freshwater pond which they had christened as duck pond, and that's where they were taking people. And Brahmini ducks were breeding in that. But otherwise, these migratory birds, these pintails and teals and poachards, they've stopped coming now because there is no water. And in fact, what was interesting was when the lake dried up, we found bones coming out, which earlier during the trade route, when from Kalimpong the trader used to come, and there used to be the poorer ones who used to walk. There would actually people and animals would die, and there was no time for doing sky burials or doing any pujas. These bodies were put into the lake. So we actually having we found bones,
What kind of bones?
animal bones. Hmm.
Any questions? We have about 5 minutes. Thanks to all our panelists.